Hi viewers, welcome you once again to Micro Learning. This is Shailaja. So today we are going to see class 12 economics. So previously we have seen regarding, that is we are going to see today theories of employment and income, slide 3.6.3. So today we are going to see equilibrium between ADF and ASF. So already we have seen regarding aggregate demand, and AS stands for aggregate supply. What is this aggregate demand tells you? That is a businessman or an entrepreneur. He is selling the products. He is producing goods and services and he is selling the products. And he is employing laborers. What does he expect? He expects revenue out of the output that he is producing. So, aggregate demand tells you the goods and services, total number of goods and services produced, to the number of laborers that the person has employed. Thus, what is the ultimate goal of him? His output. And what does he expect out of that output? He expects revenue out of it. So aggregate demand is this one. What does aggregate supply tells you? Aggregate supply tells you as such. Aggregate supply tells you total number of goods and services it should be equal to national income. So aggregate supply tells you at a total goods and services should be equal to the national income, because as the products are being produced, it has to be brought out into the market and sold into the market. That is aim of a entrepreneur. So today we are going to see the equilibrium between ADF and ASF. Already we have seen regarding aggregate demand. I hope you remember remember diagram like this where you have the aggregate demand. Okay, next we saw aggregate supply, where we told linear and non-linear. We saw about Z1 and Z. Z1 is supposed to be non-linear and Z is supposed to be linear. What does linear means? Money wages are fixed. Non-linear, wage rates increases with the employment. So as the employment keeps on increasing, wage rate also increases. So today we are going to see the relationship or the equilibrium between these two, aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So what does Keynes say regarding aggregate demand and aggregate supply? So Keynes is telling a simple two-sector economy. I hope you remember that in chapter 1 we learnt about the two-sector economy. One side we had the household and the other side we had the firm. What does the household do towards the firm and what does the firm in return does towards the household? What does the household send towards the firms? It sends all the 4 factors of production. What does the firm in return give to the household? The rewards for the 4 factors of production. So that simple two-sector economy only we are going to see here. So consisting of household sector and business sector, under which the equilibrium we can bring between ADF and ASF as such. All the decisions, okay, who decides? All decisions are concerned with consumption expenditure. It is taken by the individual. Any consumption expenditure is done only by an individual. But what does a businessman does? According to the consumption of the human beings, okay, or according to the consumption of the economy, he starts investing. So consumption expenditure is decided by you and me. Okay, but a firm decides how much of investment has to be done according to the demand of the consumer. So it also assumed that consumption function is a linear one and planned investment is autonomous. Okay, so what do you mean by linear? Linear is nothing but they use the product till they discard it as waste. Okay, so consumers use the product to the greatest extent that it becomes a waste, and after that only they throw it away. This is linear. What is autonomous? What is autonomous? Investment which is depend upon the level of income. Okay, even if there is no income, investment has to take place automatically. With whatever income the government is having, the investment will take place. So planned investment, we have planned investment is supposed to be autonomous, and consumption function is supposed to be linear. So autonomous consumption takes place automatically. The government does, even if there is no income, the investment takes place. If the income is very high, investment also is becoming automatically increases. So we have seen about the consumption, two sector economy, about consumption expenditure, and how does the planned and consumption function takes place. There are two approaches that determines the equilibrium level of income theory. What are they? Okay. So if they ask you what are the two determinants of equilibrium level, what are the two determinants of equilibrium level according to Keynes? It is aggregate demand and aggregate supply approach. Next one is saving and investment approach. So consumer saves, businessman invests. Okay. So this is the two approaches that Keynes has given on equilibrium. Now, out of these two, aggregate demand and aggregate supply approach alone is explained to understand the determinants of equilibrium level. So in this particular part below, that is 3.6.3, you can see only the aggregate demand and aggregate supply being explained. So you have a equation here. The equation is nothing but, can you see this y-axis? Y-axis represents proceeds and cost. Here you can see employment. Can you see a red line over here? The red line over here denotes aggregate demand, and you can see a blue line over here which represents aggregate supply. Okay, so now look at this point. Can you see point E? E is supposed to be equilibrium point where income and employment is equal. Okay, income and employment is equal. Now can you see here NO and NF? It is supposed to be the level of unemployment. Okay, as long as the aggregate demand is greater and supply is less, this area you will be getting profit. Once it crosses that particular line, okay, once these two lines intersect each other and they cross each other, the demand becomes less and supply becomes more. So automatically after this level, no businessman can invest because he incurs loss at this area. So whenever you draw a diagram and when you explain, first thing you have to write what does OX axis tells you, what does OY axis represent. OX axis represents and OY axis represents. After that, what is AS and what is AD. Okay, these are the things first you have to write it down. Then next only you are supposed to give the explanation for the diagram as such. So here you can see in this particular diagram, you can see aggregate demand and aggregate supply are at equilibrium at point E. So E is the point of equilibrium. Why it is called equilibrium point? Because you have the aggregate demand curve this way and aggregate supply curve intersecting at this particular point. So this is AS line and this is supposed to be AD line. So this point is called as equilibrium point as such. Next one. Now what is the employment level? It is NO. So you can see till here is the employment. Okay, as aggregate demand keeps on increasing, your employment also keeps on increasing. Up to NO it can increase. Okay. Now listen carefully so that you will know. ON1, okay, ON1, this part, we call that as employment. Next one is AS, which is equal to N1 R1. Can you see this one? N1 R1. This is supposed to be the AS equal to NI and R1. Next one. Now they are able to produce M1 to N1 level of production. Okay, M1 to N1 level of production they are able to do. During that time, what is the profit that they are expecting? This is the level of profit. Okay, again I will repeat it so you will understand what it is. ON1 is supposed to be, this part is supposed to be employment. Okay, what does aggregate AS is equal to N1 to R1. Okay. Now you see, the employment level is supposed to be ON. Now at ON1, that is ON1, the employment, where the aggregate supply is supposed to be N1 to R1. What is happening here? They are able to produce up to M1 to N1 level. We are expecting only up to this one, this level. Okay, but we are able to do to this greatest extent, that is M1 to R1. So it attains this level of profit. Entrepreneurs will employ more laborers because we are able to achieve M1 to N1 level. So what the entrepreneur will do, from N1 they keep on employing laborers. So what happens when the laborers are employed? There will be more employment level and we will reach a level of equilibrium. That is, from this level we reach towards the equilibrium point. So we have employed up to NO level of labor. That is, we have given employment to NO level. So we have achieved the equilibrium point where a aggregate demand intersects aggregate supply. Now, at the level of employment beyond ON, what happens? The aggregate demand will be below the aggregate supply and it will start losing. So, once again we can see is, after this level of employment, okay, after this ON, you can see aggregate supply is lying above and aggregate demand is lying below. Once the supply curve intersects and goes out and the demand becomes less, this area is called as loss area. Clear? So until this, an entrepreneur is able to get profit, okay, to the level of employment that he has given. But after E point, he will not be able to achieve profit because aggregate supply exceeds the aggregate demand. So hence they will never employ more people. Okay, so after that equilibrium, what happens? Automatically the production slows down. Hence they will never employ more number of laborers. So thus, what does effective demand tells you? It is the crucial point in determining the equilibrium level of output, especially in a capitalist economy or a free market economy, because the decisions are taken by the people, by the entrepreneur, because there is no government interference. So it is important to note what? Equilibrium level of employment need not be full employment, and it is understood that the difference between NO and NF is supposed to be the level of unemployment. Okay, so you can see in that diagram as such, this place where you have NO and after that you have NF. So after this point itself is called as unemployment level as such. Next is, thus what is this concept tells you? That is effective demand. Effective demand becomes significantly to explain underemployment equilibrium. So Keynes has told, because classical theory has emphasized on full employment, so Keynes has emphasized himself that unemployment will also take place, and he has proved it by ADF and ASF method as such. Okay, so this is what you can understand from this particular diagram. This is a book back question as well as a very important question. So look at the diagram carefully, explain it according to it. The diagram gives you a clear explanation, okay, how the aggregate demand and aggregate supply equilibrium functions. Okay, at the point of E it is equilibrium. Above the point equilibrium, what happens? Aggregate supply increases while aggregate demand falls as such. So those who are watching the channel for the first time, please subscribe. Click on to the bell button for further notifications. Thank you.